So, in today's readings, we kind of see a little bit of a strange juxtaposition. There is a chance for revenge by Joseph against his brothers. And then we see in the gospel that Jesus creatively responds to the indignity of being subordinate because he was not a Roman citizen or a cruel master to others. I think between both of those is a way to look at it and to lessen the power of others on our own free will and choices. So I will admit, I kind of struggle a little bit with Joseph. I mean, after all, how could he be loving and forgiving after being sold into slavery by his own brothers? Revenge seems like a far more likely conclusion to that happening. Then again, this reading is the closing act in the entire story. We miss the part where Joseph turned the tables on his brothers by detaining Benjamin, who was the youngest brother and happened to be the father's favorite, Jacob's favorite. Joseph's forgiveness of his brothers is a powerful statement that flies in the face of conventional notions of good and of evil. Maybe Joseph is acting with the same end goals that Jesus does in today's gospel. And perhaps we can better understand this gospel story if we take a look at the actions to which Jesus offers solutions. In the first case, the cloak or the coat of a slave or non-citizen could be taken from them and kept until nightfall, when they would need it back if they did not want to freeze to death. It could also happen as a security precaution for someone who needed to provide collateral, when the cloak would help guarantee how the debt would be paid. One can imagine a poor laborer having to borrow the tools to earn their daily wage, and then exchanging a portion of the money earned for the return of their cloak. Acknowledge that it is a totally aggressive action to take the cloak off of someone's back because they are poor. Exploiting the common person minimizes the trust in that transaction. In the society in the time of which Jesus lived had definite layers of hierarchy. Relationships between two people were complicated by the expectations of those with more power and rights placed on those who lacked such status. So why did Jesus, the Son of God, not become an ally of those on top? Now, Christ could have, of course, but if we're speaking of power, Jesus could have orchestrated being born into much different circumstances, being born into privilege and wealth. And we could see an empire from the beginning. But that is not what happened. And that should tell us something. Combining empire and religion is defeating the purpose of faith. God does not need a nation, nor a proclamation of a state religion. And we see this repeated over and over throughout history. So we are left with a contrast in the Old Testament, where Joseph is powerful and chooses mercy for his brothers. And the gospel, where Jesus chooses to act with mercy to the least of his brothers and sisters. What Jesus tells us today is that power is fleeting. Dignity for others is paramount. Joseph is controlling the outcome of what will happen. And Jesus is saying we control our own response to the circumstances. And that's a significant difference in approach. Jesus tells us to respond with personal integrity and dignity. And that's the metaphor we see today as Jesus asked us to love our enemies. And to be honest, sometimes I am not thrilled about the way he suggests that we do things. Loving our enemies? Seriously? They're called our enemies for a reason. Loving them? I do not think Jesus is asking us to accept the actions of those with whom we do not like, nor is he asking us to be best buddies with those who would harm us. Instead, he is asking us to recognize that the worst of our enemies still has humanity. And when we see inhumanity in others, what happens? As I said at the beginning of this sermon, the ultimate goal of Jesus is to lessen the power of others on our own free will and choices. Seeing the humanity in others allows us to realize that our enemies are not invincible. There exists in them the ability to change. What Jesus asks of us today is the hardest possible action we can take. Loving our enemies is not for their benefit, it is for our own benefit. Let me say that again. Loving our enemies is not for their benefit, it is for our own benefit, because it affirms us and our own integrity. We are living in tumultuous times. And if you are mad, upset about an injustice, I see you. I understand you. Things are happening in our country that we personally have little control over, affecting the lives of huge numbers of people. If you are frustrated or worried or angry, that can be expected. But by seeing the humanity in others, we can also see that we are not powerless in our response to actions that we find objectionable. We can speak up. We can affirm others in their worth when they are being marginalized. We can keep people and cultures from being erased. We can bind together and strengthen our own communities. And we can take care of each other. Now, we do not know what will happen to us from day to day. But like Jesus, we should not back away from challenges to our viewpoints. By loving our enemies, even from afar, we remain faithful to Jesus. So the big question is how will we work to do the same? How will we work by loving our enemies? How will that work? So love our enemies. And see the humanity in all people, including those that we call our enemies. We should speak up when we can, affirm others in their worth and dignity, bind and strengthen our communities, and take care of each other. I believe that is what Jesus asks us to do. Take care of one another. Amen.